This is a basic demonstration of how to create a document for an assignment that uses mail merge. Now, why would you want to use mail merge for an assignment? It allows you to set the same questions for a variety of students, but give them each different values on which to answer those questions. So let me demonstrate what this might look for you. We need two apps. I've got Excel over here on the left and Word over here on the right. You want to begin by deciding what your assignment is going to be about. So suppose in Mathematics Extension 1, I'm going to set them an assignment on polynomials. So once you've got that decided, you need to think about what kind of information you want to assign to your students. And once you've got that ready, you can dive into your spreadsheet. Now, I would recommend that you actually don't start with a blank spreadsheet like what I have here, but if possible, like through a learning management system such as Central, download a spreadsheet, get it to generate a spreadsheet of your students sorted by class alphabetically, and then rather than having to write all of these names in just kind of sort of manually, you'll have a pre-populated list that you can then set aside and use for any assignments that you like. Now, I don't have one of those, so that's why I've just typed in a few names. And over here on the right-hand side, I want to put in the data that I want to transfer from my spreadsheet over into my assignment document. So because I'm thinking about polynomials, I'm going to have some coefficients here. Maybe I'll make this a cubic, so I'll need 4. And at this point, I'm going to assign different values so that I have different equations for Anna, Brian, and Colin. Now, I could do this manually. I could say I want that one to be 5, and this one to be 1, and this one to be 2. But I can take advantage of the fact that Excel can generate these random numbers for me. So if I start saying RAND for random, I've got a couple of different options here for how to generate my random numbers. Rand between is a pretty useful function that if you provide a range, a minimum number and a maximum number, it'll hand you back a random number in that range. So for example, if I want my number between 2 and 8, all I need to do is to copy that equation, paste it down to the other students, and you can see this is going to generate a new random number for me. In fact, every time I change the spreadsheet, even by saying, writing in a word, it will regenerate. If you just copy and paste a blank cell into itself, it will generate new random numbers for you. And so I will get as many numbers as I like. Now I'm going to keep on doing this. Let's see if I can make something a little more interesting here. So let's make this a bigger kind of coefficient, like so. And I'm just going to use those over there. Okay, here we go. So at this point, what I have created is a set of data for each of my students, but because all of these numbers here, and they don't have to be coefficients, they could be, the cost of a car or your interest rate for a loan, because these are all based on formulas, which you can see up in this bar here. This 18 is not really 18, it's this formula, this random number formula. And if I close this and reopen it, those numbers will change, just like I demonstrated before. These keep on adjusting. So what I'm going to do is down here in the bottom left-hand corner, I'm going to call this particular sheet, I'm going to call it the formula sheet. Everything that I've just entered up here, all these numbers are based on formulas. But now if I duplicate this, so if I right-click on that little tab down the bottom, I can say move or copy. I want to create a copy of this entire sheet. You can see because it's based on a formula, even though I created a copy, it's got different numbers because the formulas have regenerated. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this data here. In fact, you can just select the entire sheet if you wanted. And I'm going to do something that seems a bit counterintuitive. I'm going to copy and then paste all of this data back on itself. Now, as mentioned before, the data is regenerated. But if you have a look over here on the top right hand corner, this new menu has appeared. It says paste options. Now, if you click on that, you've got a whole different bunch of ways to paste your values. Here, if I paste them as values, there's a little clipboard just with numbers beside it. If I click that, then these numbers change one more time, but then they lock in place. You can see that these numbers are no longer formulas. That 14, it's just 14. If I rename this to value will do. I can now distinguish, and this is going to be important later on when I go to my Word document. I can now distinguish between the formula sheet, which has all of these, sort of the background, the formula in the background. And over here, these are just the numbers. And I don't want them to change once I'm assigning them to students because I want to be able to mark my students' work and so on. So I'm going to leave this as it is. All right, this spreadsheet is pretty much done. So I'm going to save this. Let's call this, where am I going to put it? Let's browse over to, let's chuck this on the desktop. And I'll call this mail merge data so I can find it. Now that I've saved this, now I'm going to go over to my Word document. Now, this polynomials assignment, the first thing I'm going to note is that because each student is going to get a different assignment, I need to put the name of this student on here. Now, I don't want to write this manually. The whole point of using this spreadsheet is to get the program to do this for me. So up in the top here, if you have a look along these tabs, home, insert, draw, design, etc., there's this one tab which you've probably never ever used called mailings. If you click on that, you'll see a lot of these options are grayed out, and that's because we haven't loaded up any data. To load up data, we want to go to select recipients, click on this menu, and I'm going to use an existing list, the list that I just created in Excel. If I click on that, head over to my desktop where I saved this spreadsheet. There it is, mail merge data. When I open this up, it'll then ask me, well, which sheet do you want to use? Do you remember we had that formula sheet which had all of the equations on it that randomly generated our numbers, but the value sheet is where the numbers have been fixed in place. So I'm going to say, okay. Now, if you've done this right, up here, these buttons that were gray before, you can now click on them. And the most important one that you're going to want is this one here, Insert Merge Field. Now, you can see there's sort of two halves to this button. I'm going to click the bottom half, and you can recognize these things as the headings of our spreadsheet, the name of my student, and then each of the coefficients. So I'm going to hit on name. And you can see here, these funky little arrows here indicate to you that this is not just a word that appears. When you print this, it will draw data from your spreadsheet. So I'm just going to say that this student says, consider the polynomial, let's see here, I'm going to write an equation, p of x equals, okay, now at this point, instead of writing in a number like 6 for, what I want my coefficient to be, I want to draw this coefficient from my spreadsheet. So I'm going to go back to mailings. I'm going to say insert merge field, and I'm going to pick the coefficient that I want. Coefficient A, that'll be the coefficient of x cubed, plus coefficient B, that'll be the coefficient of x squared, plus the coefficient C, which will just have an x attached to it, plus, and then I've got coefficient D. I'm going to say consider that. And what would I like to do? Calculate the sum of the roots. How about that? That's a good way to start. Maybe I'll make that part A, and then I'll write some other questions later. Now, if you want to make this a bit easier to read, you can go up the top here and you can click the Highlight Merge Fields button, and then everything that is drawing data from your spreadsheet will be highlighted in gray in case those arrows were not enough of a signal for you. Now, if you want to know if it all came out properly, then again, up the top here, if you say preview results, when I click on this, it's going to look at the same document, but it's going to substitute some of that data into those fields. So if I click on this, lo and behold, this is Anna's polynomial. And if I go next to the preview results button, I can check through all of the different students who are in my spreadsheet. So if I click over, I've got Brian's, and if you have a look at the polynomial, it's going to change. When I go to the next one, it changes again. There's Collins. So this is the essence of how the mail merge works. Now, when you're ready, you can say finish and merge. You can print those documents, and if you want all of them, all the students, or if you just want a particular one, you say, oh, some student has lost his assignment, so you don't need to print out the whole lot, just one of them. I am going to say all of them because there's only 3. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a PDF out of that. Maybe you want to email that to your staff so that they can then print out a class set. If I say okay, it's going to prompt me for a name, so I'll put this on the desktop as well. I'll call this mail merge finished. Now when I hit save, it'll take a second. But then what it creates, if I go to my desktop now, is this PDF, which if I open it up, there's Anna's assignment on page 1. If I scroll down, you can see on page 2, here is Brian's assignment, and page 3 has Collins. So This is the nuts and bolts of how the mail merge works. You can make it as sophisticated as you like. But one of the cool things that you can do if you come back to your spreadsheet is because each of the students has a different assignment, you might think, well, what about when I'm marking this thing? Well, the beauty of having this all in Excel is you can get this to generate your answers. So for example, one of the things I asked in the assignment was calculate the sum of the roots. Well, I know how to do that based on the coefficients A, B, C, and D. I can say, well, the sum of the roots is negative B on A. When I get that calculation there, I can copy that down, and because it's a formula, I can copy it all the way down, and I will have the different solutions for each of the different problem sets and all the different numbers that come with them. So I can get my spreadsheet not just to create the assignment for me, but also to generate my solutions. So that's the basics of it, using Excel and Word together. Make sure you save your work so that you don't lose it. And that's pretty much all there is to actually using a mail merge. If you want to make it nice and complicated, all you have to do is try and add in more fields in here and then use them in your assignment document. So I hope that helps you with setting your assessment tasks.